Welcome to the Chief Women Arise talk show. Today, we're going to be talking about how to read people like a book. And there's been a lot of books that have been written on this subject, but I want you to understand how important it is that we look at things besides just what people say. There's so much more that we speak with our body language, with our expressions, with all the nonverbal communication. It communicates a lot. And so every gesture that a person makes is like a single word in a paragraph. So if you put it all together with the words and the gestures, then hopefully you'll get to a place where you'll be able to understand people better and therefore communicate better. And so this is about communication. How do we express ourselves to another person, whether it's an individual or a group? All of us are public speakers, so we want to read the audience. And so these things help us to read the audience. Why is observing body language useful in relationships? It really tells a lot more about the person. And you get to where you can actually, in a sense, know their meaning behind the words. Because sometimes people have trouble saying exactly what they mean or how they feel. But if you understand the gestures and can watch the body language, then it can make a huge difference. It helps us to be sensitive to other people. It helps us when we're communicating using the proper words. Sometimes we have to get louder or softer. You can tell by the body language. Are they hearing us? It can keep us from offending someone, if we're watching their body language. And it helps us to connect with the audience. But it takes practice. This takes intentionality to be able to read the body language and interpret it correctly. A good example of this is we used to do a skit when I travel around the world where in different languages, different cultures all the time. And so we have this little skit that we do, and it's called Sour Pickles. Or in some countries, we do sour lemons because they don't eat pickles. But it's, one person is sitting down and she's having a nice little bowl of pickles and she's eating them, but they're so sour. Every time she takes a bite, she makes this horrible face, and so we acted out in the skit of her making all these facial expressions. And her friend walks in and waves to her. And at that moment, she's just taken a bite. And so she makes this horrible expression. And immediately the friend gets offended. What have I done? Why wouldn't you say hi to me? She misinterprets the whole scenario because she didn't notice she was eating a pickle. And so it's a great illustration of what we're talking about here. You can misinterpret those things if you're not careful. But if you'll look at what's called gesture clusters, then it can help you to monitor and to understand. For example, if you're looking at 3 different signals, let's call them, from people's body language and facial expressions. If all 3 of them kind of interpret the same way, then it's a pretty good idea that you've gotten it right. But if you take one of those out of context, as an example, one of the things is they say when you touch your nose, it means that you're not quite being honest. There's a little bit of a lie in there, or maybe a half truth if you touch your nose. What if you're about to sneeze, or you've got allergies? I mean, there are other reasons to touch your nose. And so these are the kinds of things we want to talk about. So I want to ask you ladies, what does it mean? Let's take one incident, and then as we go through, I'll let you add some others in. If I'm talking and I cover my mouth, what are some of the possibilities? What would that mean?
You're insecure.
Yeah.
Bad breath.
Bad breath, yeah.
I was thinking the bad breath one as well. Maybe a little insecure, shy.
Yeah.
Or not confident in what you're speaking.
Yeah. Or maybe you have food in your mouth.
Yeah.
I know in Asian cultures, it's very proper to cover your mouth when you're giggling or laughing. And so, some of it can be a cultural thing. They go, it's really cute.
Yeah.
So, this is one of the examples of what I'm talking about here, is you can misinterpret those things. It's little things like if somebody is sitting up and leaning in, what does that convey to you? So think about these things. They're listening. It could be a challenge, I'm leaning in because I'm ready for a fight, so there's different ways you can interpret them. So one single gesture can easily be misinterpreted. So if you look for the group of gestures and listen to the words, then you confirm what you think you see. And so if you walk into a room and size up the crowd, You know, do you do that? What do you look for when you walk into a room? If you're walking into a room, let's say a networking room, because that's pretty,
Yeah.
cold. You don't necessarily know everybody in there. And you're walking in there and you size up the room. What do you look for in that room?
I know for me, it's like people who seem happy to be there.
Mhm.
And then sometimes it might be, depending on the type of networking event, like the people who seem welcoming, like their personality seem welcoming, like it's kind of drawing you to them or their table to get to know them.
Yeah, it's good.
For me, I think it's somebody who's standing by themselves. That's what draws me. It's like, hey, let me go over there and talk to her
Mhm.
or him.
That shows your heart. That's sweet.
Yeah. For me, I'm looking who's gathering with who, if we're talking about a networking event, because you'll see different pockets of people gathering, and I like to scan the room and I like to observe and just try to see what's going on.
Yeah, that's good. But when you walk into a room, you might see several people, you might see somebody with their arms crossed, leaning back, you can interpret that.
Right.
If somebody's more open with their hands open or talking with their hands, they can interpret that a different way.
Mhm.
So you see where I'm coming from is how important all these things are, because you can walk in a room and in a minute size up the audience,
Mhm.
and then you know what to do, where to go, especially if you're at a sales pitch kind of a thing, or you're the speaker that day,
Yeah.
you begin to learn how to do that. I've had times when I've been speaking and I see somebody yawn on the front row, and it's like, oh, great, they're all bored with it.
Yes.
So, but what does that really mean? I mean, it has other meanings as well. But then, if I think maybe they are bored with me, I try to liven up my message. Maybe I'll get louder or a little bit more demonstrative, tell a joke real quick or challenge the audience.
Mhm.
There's different techniques you can do for your public speaking. So let's talk about facial expressions.
Mhm.
Eye contact. Have you been with someone before and they won't look at you when they're talking to you? And
Oh, yeah.
how does that make you feel? How do you interpret that?
My ex-husband never looks at me. I just love him anyways. It never bothers me anymore
Mhm.
because I don't allow it to.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of that is conveying that he's ashamed.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's like hiding something.
Yeah.
You can't look them in the eyes because we know the eyes are the windows of the soul,
Yeah.
and you can read something in somebody's eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know for me, working with kids and coaching, that used to drive me crazy. If I'm talking directly, like face to face with you, or if I'm asking you how you doing, you just can't, well, especially with the phones, it's like, can't
Mhm.
just look up and say, I'm fine, or, acknowledge me even having the conversation with you. So I know for me, it used to be like, but I also learned that they have their own moods or whatever they're dealing with too. Like a big part of me being a good leader for them is to understand that everyone was different, but they might be having an off or down day. So how can I come in and kind of lift their spirits, not always take it as, they got an attitude, they don't want to listen to me type thing.
Yeah. And that brings up a good point about misinterpreting, because you can assume something, and if you go to the negative and that assumption, that can be harder to undo, once you've made that, that first impression thing.
Mhm.
And to be careful of that when you are analyzing people and looking for gestures. But, what does it mean when somebody looks away, looks down, looks up, closes their eyes? All of these gestures
Mhm.
have something there.
Mhm.
A lot of times when I'm talking to somebody and I'm trying to collect my thoughts and say it better, I'll look away.
Mhm.
And that kind of helps me focus, but if somebody doesn't know that, they could take
Yeah.
offense from that,
Yeah.
so it's getting to know the person that you're talking with. And this comes over time. Closing their eyes. A lot of times people close their eyes to listen better
Mhm.
or to concentrate more, or maybe they're sleeping.
Yes. Yeah.
One example of this is with my husband. That's somebody I've had years of study.
Mhm.
And when we were newly married, and I'd be sharing my heart with him or something, he would have this frown on his face. And so I'm thinking, he's mad at me already. What did I say to offend him? I'm just sharing my heart. I get so upset. And it wasn't until later I realized that that's the way he concentrates.
Mm.
You know, he will squint and kind of frown, and it's like it's more intense. He's
Mhm.
really listening when he does that.
Mm.
You know, but I was getting offended because
Yeah.
I misinterpreted the sign. You know, so again, look at the cluster of gestures, the cluster of signs
Mhm.
to help you with that. I thought he was mad at me.
Mhm.
So what are some other signs? Let's talk about facial expressions, you know, what you do with your mouth or your eyes or your head tilt. Can you think of something, maybe something you do or something you've observed from other people around you?
I know culturally, if a woman goes like this, that means she has an attitude. She's about to go in. When you start seeing the neck rolling, you better get ready.
Get out of the way.
Well, let me tell you, I have neck issues. See, that's what I'm talking about. You know, it can be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
So you got to go with the words that are
Yeah.
spoken, the rest of the body language, and the neck roll.
Yeah.
You know, come up with 3 things at least that will confirm what you think
Right,
before you jump to a conclusion.
right.
Yeah, I know I mentioned the nose. If you rub your nose, they say that in most people, that means they're unsure of their answer or they're lying to you.
Yeah.
But it also says that if they touch their ear or behind their ear, it means they're not quite confident with what they have said. You know, they're not sure it's absolutely right or it's what the answer you wanted. So if you see somebody kind of, you know, pull at their ear a little or rub behind their ear, it's supposed to be a sign. For most people, I mean, these are across the board, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about your lips? What if you pout your lip? You know, what does that mean? If you do like a
Yeah.
half smile or you bite your lip,
Yeah,
Nervous.
yeah,
nervousness. Yeah.
Sometimes that can mean you try not to say the wrong thing
Right.
too.
right.
I'm
Right.
just gonna hold my whole lip.
Yeah.
Cause I used to get told when I was younger, they could read, even though I wasn't saying stuff, they could read it on my face.
Yeah.
So then I would go home and try to practice facial expressions, but it didn't really work because you kind of need the person talking to make you respond a certain way. But I said, okay, I'm just gonna sit there like this. So they don't think like whatever I'm thinking in my mind, they don't interpret that. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, your fingers, this is a new thing that people have started training themselves to do because that's a sign of confidence that you hold your hands this way. And so you'll see more and more pictures of people doing this. And when they get up to speak, you know, the TED Talks, they do a lot of that. So we can also interpret some of those things and add them in to our personal gestures.
Yeah.
Me and Naomi practice.
Practice analysis. So practice those things, you know, but we can, and communication, verbal communication is only part of it. And so that's what I want our audience to think about. And, you know, send us a message in the chat and to let us know some of the things that you think about, you know, what can we add to our communication and how can we interpret others so that we can be better communicators. And remember, that's the purpose. It's not to condemn someone else or to correct them. It's for our benefit so that we can communicate better. So yeah, so let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, have a good one.